Alrighty, hello, and welcome to my channel. This channel is for educational purposes, and we check out great theories and concepts and discoveries that you might not be familiar with. And it's most likely that you're not familiar with them because they have been marginalized and or suppressed from your purview. You have to do a lot of digging uh, to come across this information. The powers that be are trying to shield you from it because it's powerful in terms of your improving your quest for better spiritual, mental, and physical health. And this is number 443 of our Bible Decode series. We're trying to share with you information about the Bible that you might not know about, and your priest or pastor will never tell you, even if they did know themselves. And mostly we've been exploring the Roman origins hypothesis for the New Testament. That is that the Romans are the true authors of the New Testament. We're about to start a new book today um, that is only tangentially related to that. And this is another book from Kersey Graves, written way back in 1865, called Biography of Satan. And it is my contention that the Romans are the true authors of Satan. There is no Satan in the Old Testament of the Bible. The word is used a handful of times, but it refers to a human being each time. And it refers to a human being who is an obstacle or an impediment. Um, and the supernatural Satan that we have in our imaginations is one of the New Testament. And later developments, a lot of later artwork, paintings, and so on from the Dark and Middle Ages, Dante's Divine Comedy, and Milton's Paradise Lost, but primarily Hollywood. That is really what our conception of Satan is stemming from. It doesn't really have any um, legitimacy historically. Um, Comes from the Romans. Now, Graves here, writing 161 years ago, was not aware of the Roman origins hypothesis, but he knows that the um, uh, biography of Satan comes from other sources, earlier sources, sources that the Romans used to, uh, create the Old Testament. I mean, the New Testament. The Romans used a plethora of sources to construct the New Testament. It was constructed as a psychological operation against the Jews. And in doing so, they had to make it look like a real religion, Christianity. Um, and we've gone through this. But the story of Jesus is a fictional story that was cobbled together from all kinds of older sources, and the same is true of Satan. So, so the full title of this book is Biography of Satan, or A Historical Exposition of the Devil and His Fiery Dominions, disclosing the Oriental origin of the belief in a devil and future endless punishment. Also, an explanation of the pagan origin of the scriptural terms bottomless pit, lake of fire and brimstone, chains of darkness, casting out devils, worm that never dieth, etc. Okay, and this is the fourth edition of this book, so there is a preface here written by a different author or forward, and I think we're going to skip that um, and just get right into it here. So let's see how long this goes forward. Um, yeah, sorry about this. Hold for processing, please. And we will scroll through this as quickly as we possibly can. And these 19th century authors, they can be a bit wordy sometimes. A lot of times they just kind of go on and on. But um, I guess we're just going to start with the preface. And this may or may not be too relevant either, but the preface starts with in presenting the present edition of this work to the public, the author deems it necessary only to add in the preface that it has been thoroughly revised and corrected, and that the numerous responses from those who availed themselves of a copy of the previous edition of the book leaves the author no reason to doubt that the motive which actuated him in the publication of it will be fully realized. That motive was to expose and arrest the progress of the most terror inciting superstition that ever nestled in the bosom of the ignorant, or that ever prostrated the energies of the human mind and reduced its possessor to the condition of an abject, groveling, and trembling slave. It is common in the prefatory exegesis of a work to explain the motives which lead to its authorship or compilation. But as the motives which prompted this work are already partially disclosed in the initiatory chapter headed Address to the Reader, and the succeeding chapter which sets forth some of the practical evils which spring legitimately from the doctrine of future or post mortem punishment, we will only add to the explanation thus furnished so far as to state 1. That notwithstanding many ages have rolled away since the after death penalty was first originated and promulgated to the world, yet no work designed to furnish to the general reader a full and at the same time brief exposition of the origin and design of this mischievous doctrine with all its various and multifarious terms, dogmas, and childish traditions, has ever before been presented to the public since an extensive inquiry has been awakened on the subject. 2. We deem it a matter of the greatest moment that someone should make the effort to arrest the almost boundless tide of terror and misery of which the practical dissemination of the doctrine of endless damnation has ever been and still is a truly prolific source. For no person who has not scrutinizingly investigated the matter can form any just or proximate conception of the extent to which the heathen and Christian worlds have been demoralized and flooded with misery and unhappiness by the propagation of this doctrine. These facts, wedded to the hope of checking this widespread river, this shoreless current of mischief, constitute our principal reason for publishing this work. The single and serious fact that the superstitious fear of after death punishment furnishes the primary motive power by which more than 1,000,000 sermons are annually dealt out from the Christian pulpits of the United States alone, at a cost of many millions of dollars, levied mainly upon the pockets of the poor, which have the effect of exciting in the minds of the religious classes the most agonizing emotions and the most torturing fears, often producing temporarily the ruin of health and happiness, even among the most virtuous, and the people, and most of the priests, too, being ignorant of the origins of these alarming superstitious doctrines. The author considers as ample warrant upon moral grounds for attempting the task of aiding in checking the evil and demoralizing effects of this barbarous, anti civilizing, and terrifying heathen superstition. Whether these reasons furnish a sufficient justification for such an enterprise is left for the candid reader to judge. And it is gratifying to learn that the superstitious fear which in every age and country in which it has prevailed and enslaved the minds of thousands and still holds millions in its iron grasp is likely to be better understood in its real nature, its pernicious effects, and its origin. Okay, and that is the end of the preface. Let's get into the contents here. Still got to scroll through the table of contents. There are 17 chapters and also an appendix. This is a short book. This is not going to be like his last book, 16 Crucified Saviors, that took us, I believe, 87 days to get through. We should be able to get through this in maybe 10 days, maybe 12. Um, could be more. Certainly less than 25. We'll say that. Okay, introduction is called Fear Hath Torment. Friendly reader, are you or have you ever been a believer in the doctrine of future endless punishment? And did you ever tremble with fearful apprehension that you might be irrevocably doomed to a life of interminable woe beyond the tomb? Did you ever shudder at the horrible thought that either yourself or some of your dearest friends might possibly, in the day of accounts, be numbered among those who are to receive the terrible sentence, "Depart from me, ye cursed, into everlasting fire, prepared for the devil and his angels"? And that's from Matthew 25:41. Were you ever tormented and goaded with such fearful forebodings as these, and haunted with them day and night for weeks and months together, if not during long and tedious years, as thousands upon thousands of the most devout believers in the Christian faith have been in all ages of the church? Or were you ever present during a religious revival to witness the priest remove the cover from hell's burning mouth, that blazing bottomless pit whose lurid flames of fire ascendeth up forever and ever? And did you hear him depict to a terror stricken audience the awful fate of the countless millions of the doomed, damned souls of the underground world? Did you ever listen as he portrayed their agonizing sufferings and spoke of their loud, terror inspiring, heart-rending wailings of anguish, their woeful groans, their doleful yells, and soul bursting shrieks of despair, which, like a thousand commingling thunders reverberating along the great archway of their murky prison, shook heaven and earth and hell? And did a shuddering fear steal over your nerveless frame and chill the blood in your very hearts in spite of your efforts to resist it and stave it off? As the pulpit orator in glowing eloquence depicted the wretched inhabitants of this world of woe as being tossed to and fro with their naked souls upon a fathomless sea of flame, a shoreless ocean of boiling, blazing, and sulphurous fire, lashed into furious, dashing, mountainous billows by the ever thundering, ever bursting, never ceasing storms of divine wrath? And as they essay to quench their parching thirst with this liquid fire, the worm that never dies robed in burning brimstone, we are told, makes his eternal feast upon the vitals of their bleeding hearts, lacerated by the swift sped thunderbolts of Jehovah's direful vengeance. Aye, the barbed arrows, fresh drawn from God's own quiver, an old grim Lucifer, the deputed executor of God's vengeful wrath, heedless of their doleful yells and maddening cries, culminates the awful drama as he woods up the fires and keeps them burning, and pours the red hot, blistering embers down their shrieking throats. A popular clergyman, the Reverend Mr. D, in a fit of inspirational turgescence and mental explosion, which recently came off in Xenia, Ohio, as he collapsed, let off the following quote, fathers and sons, pastors and people, husbands and wives, brothers and sisters, in unquenchable fire with swollen veins and bloodshot eyes, strain toward each other's throats and hearts, reprobate men and women, devils in form and features, hideous to behold, as God's vengeance is in his heart, and he delights to execute it. He will tread them in his wrath and trample them in his fury, and he will stain all his garments with their blood. My head grows dizzy as it bends over the gulf. Uh, he's got some parentheticals here. Okay. Take another example. A Reverend Mr. Clausen, a Methodist Episcopal clergyman, as, quote, it came to pass, being once pregnant with the spirit of eternal damnation, and not knowing, as we suspect, whether he was in the body or out of the body. 2 Corinthians 2:4. Blew up the unconverted portion of his audience in the following spasmodic style. Quote, God will heap the red hot cinders of black damnation upon your naked souls as high as the pyramids of Egypt. End quote. We suggest that Mrs. Partington would have considered this as rather a dangerous case of information on the brain or a rush of brains to the head. Now, kind reader, let me ask you, have you had any practical experience in listening to such frightful and frightening ebullitions of folly and fanaticism as the foregoing, which we have presented here as mere specimens of the kind of priestly flummery which are continually rolling out from the pulpit upon the recurrence of every Sabbath in every part of Christendom? Though it is true, such pompous and foolish language is not always used as is found in the examples we have here presented, yet the spirit manifested is the same. And have you ever calculated or reflected upon the vast, untold, and almost inconceivable amount of terror, fright, misery, and despair, and consequent destruction of happiness it has brought to millions of minds and millions of families of the present era, as well as those of the remotely past superstitious ages? If so, you can understand our object and appreciate our motive in throwing this book before the public. For certain we are that in fear there is torment, and consequently unhappiness. And certain we are too that if the 200 millions of people called Christians could be made acquainted with the historical facts which will be found in this work, and which go to prove most conclusively that the doctrine of future endless punishment was originated and concocted by designing priests, and that a benevolent and beneficent God had nothing to do with their origination, as is claimed by the devout disciples of every primitive religion in the world, it would have the effect to dissipate a fathomless and shoreless ocean of fear and misery from the religious world. For it is now well known to every intelligent person that the fear of endless damnation has been, and still is, a powerful engine in the hands of the priests for converting souls to God. Therefore, for grinding sinners into saints. And there has always been at least 10 devil dreading, hell fearing Christians to one that is made practically righteous by the natural love of virtue and truth. It is the fear of the devil and not the love of God which extorts from them a reluctant and tardy conformity to the principles of justice and the rules of practical honesty. That is, the devil is virtually set upon their track as a hound dog to scare them into heaven. And thus, they are nothing less, properly speaking, than drafted saints, or rather pious sinners, Christians by practice, but villains at heart. And if they shall receive the final benediction of well done, it will, we opine, have to be attributed more to a pair of fleet legs than to a virtuous mind, for the former achieve the work enabling them to outrun the grand adversary of souls, who howls upon every Christian's track like a roaring lion seeking whom he may devour. And here we may note it as a remarkable fact that, as momentous and solemnly important as this subject must be admitted to be, involving as it does our fate to all eternity, yet not one pious Christian in 1,000 is able, when interrogated upon the subject, to give an intelligent answer as to the origin of the doctrine of post mortem punishment. I have never found one that could. They know nothing about how, when, or where it first started, and this ignorance is sufficient to account for their blind and tenacious adherence to the superstition. It is generally believed and assumed that its primary source is the Christian Bible. And does not, we ask, this lamentable ignorance greatly enhance the necessity and importance of publishing and circulating a work of this character, that by virtue of superior knowledge the people may be undeceived but in supposing that it is of divine institution, instead of being, as history proves, of mundane priestly origin, and that they may thereby be delivered from the agonizing thraldom of fear and fright which have in all past ages beset the votaries of the various fear-fraught religions. If it were ever a wise policy to try to frighten men into the path of virtue by the fear of hell torments, as was ingeniously argued by the Grecian Polyarchus, that policy is now superseded by the substitution of more honorable, more laudable, and more enduring motives. Okay, that is the end of the introduction. And chapter 1 is called Evils and Demoralizing Effects of the Doctrine of Endless Punishment. And we will start with that chapter tomorrow when we return. But for today, please like, share, subscribe, comment, and contribute. And come back tomorrow for Bible Decode episode number 444. Have a wonderful day.